Clara exhaled heavily as she folded the last piece of laundry in their cramped apartment. It had been a grueling day at school, and all she longed for was a quiet evening. Reaching for Mark's jacket to toss it in the wash, her hand stilled. A crumpled envelope peeked out of the pocket. Curiosity tugged at her, and she pulled it free, smoothing out the creases. Her heart sank. Eviction notice. The bold red letters at the top hit her like a punch to the chest. The letter spelled out that they were 3 months behind on rent. Clara's mind raced. How could this have happened? She had trusted Mark to handle the bills while she managed their household. "Mark," she called, her voice trembling, not with anger, but fear. Mark appeared in the doorway, his easy smile fading as soon as he saw the paper in her hands. "What's this?" Clara demanded, her voice unsteady. Mark hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign of his nervousness. "I can explain," he began, but Clara cut him off. "Explain what?" "That we're about to lose our home? That you've been hiding this from me for months?" Mark stepped forward, reaching for the notice. "Clara, listen, it's not what you think. I had to help Sophia. She needed money for the kids' school fees, and then the car broke down." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "You gave our rent money to your sister? She's been struggling since her husband passed," Mark said defensively. "I couldn't just let her go under." Clara's anger surged. "So instead, you decided to let us go under?" She waved the notice in his face. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or were you planning to wait until we were out on the street?" Mark tried to take her hands, but she pulled away. "I was going to fix it," he said, his voice quieter now. "I've been working extra hours. I thought I could catch up before it got this far." "Fix it?" Clara repeated, her voice rising. "With what money, Mark? Our savings are gone, aren't they?" Mark's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Clara turned away, her thoughts spiraling. Their home, their life, it all felt like a lie. And for what? So Sophia could keep up appearances? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Sophia herself. "Can't wait for family dinner tomorrow. Love you both." The irony stung, and Clara let out a bitter laugh. Sophia, who was supposedly struggling, had time to plan dinners while they faced eviction. "I can fix this," Mark said again, his voice pleading now. "I just need more time." Clara stared at him, the man she'd married 5 years ago, now a stranger. "You made your choice, Mark," she said coldly. "And it wasn't me." Mark froze in the doorway as Clara turned back to the laundry. She didn't know how they would get through this, but one thing was certain, the trust between them had shattered. The next morning, Clara woke early. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the events of the night before. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, glaring at her like a bad omen. She sipped her coffee, staring at it, her thoughts a tangled mess. How had they gotten to this point? Had she been blind to Mark's actions, too trusting to see the warning signs? Mark was still asleep, or pretending to be. Clara didn't care. She needed space. Grabbing her bag, she left the apartment, letting the door slam behind her. Her destination was clear, Tina. Tina's office was in the heart of downtown Portland. Clara had barely texted her friend a brief summary of the situation before Tina called back, her tone sharp and concerned. "Get here. Now." When Clara arrived, Tina was waiting outside, leaning against the building with 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. "This better be a joke," Tina said, handing one to Clara as they started walking. "I wish it was," Clara muttered. She recounted everything, the eviction notice, the drained savings, Mark's excuses, and Sophia's constant demands. Tina listened silently, her expression darkening with every word. When Clara finished, Tina stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're telling me Mark gave away your savings without telling you? While you're working yourself to the bone to keep things afloat?" "Yes," Clara whispered. Saying it out loud only made the betrayal cut deeper. Tina sighed, shaking her head. "This isn't just a bad decision, Clara. It's a betrayal. He didn't even give you a chance to weigh in, he just took from you." Clara's throat tightened. "I keep asking myself why he didn't trust me enough to tell me. I could have helped figure something out. Because he didn't want to hear no, Tina said bluntly. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, especially when he's trying to please Sophia. The mention of Sophia made Clara's blood boil. She's been living with us for months, Tina. Months? I thought she was trying to get back on her feet, Clara said, her voice tight. But now it feels like she's just using us, and Mark's letting her. Tina gave her a long look. You need to figure out where your line is, Clara. What's the limit before you've had enough? Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure where her limit was yet, but she knew she was getting close. That evening, Clara returned home to find Sophia sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The television blared a reality show in the background, and the faint smell of popcorn lingered in the air. Her 2 young children darted around the living room, toys scattered everywhere. Clara. Sophia called brightly, as if everything was fine. Dinner's almost ready. Hope you don't mind, I used that fancy pasta you bought last week. The kids were craving something special. Clara clenched her jaw. Fancy pasta. The same pasta she and Mark had been saving for a rare date night. Forcing a tight smile, she replied, no problem, and walked into the kitchen, where Mark was stirring a pot on the stove. He looked up, guilt etched across his face. Clara, not now, she cut him off, her voice sharp. She grabbed a glass of water and left, ignoring the tension that clung to the air like a storm cloud. The next day, Clara sat in her classroom during her lunch break, staring at her phone. A notification had popped up from Sophia's Instagram account. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The post showed Sophia's kids in brand new outfits, holding shopping bags from an upscale mall. The caption read, "Fresh start, new beginnings, so blessed." Clara's stomach churned. How could Sophia flaunt expensive purchases while they were on the brink of eviction? Frustration bubbled up inside her, and she texted Tina immediately, "Wine, my place, tonight." Tina arrived that evening with 2 bottles of red wine and a grim expression. As Clara vented, pouring out the details of Sophia's latest outrage, Tina shook her head. She's bragging about her life on Instagram while draining yours? And Mark just stands by and lets her? Exactly, Clara exclaimed. Then stop letting him, Tina said firmly, pouring Clara a generous glass of wine. You don't owe them anything, Clara. If they're going to treat you like a doormat, it's time to show them the door. Clara stared at the swirling wine in her glass. Tina was right, but it wasn't that simple. She had loved Mark. She had trusted him. Letting go of their life together wasn't a decision she could take lightly. The family dinner the following evening was everything Clara had expected, and worse. Sophia arrived early with a casserole dish, immediately taking charge of the kitchen as if it were her home. Mark hovered around her, eager to help and hanging on her every word. Sophia played the role of the grieving widow, her children once again the center of attention. Clara sat through it all in silence, her appetite gone. She listened as Sophia's mother, Linda, praised Mark for being such a good brother and scolded Clara for not being more understanding of family struggles. Finally, Clara had enough. She set her fork down with a sharp clink and looked directly at Sophia. Do you want to tell everyone the truth, or should I? The room fell silent. Sophia blinked, feigning innocence. What do you mean? I mean the truth about where the money really went, the shopping, the trips, the expensive meals, Clara said, her voice steady, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. The money Mark took from me to give to you. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Mark's face drained of color, and he looked as though he wanted to disappear. Sophia's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Clara pulled her phone from her pocket, opened the screenshots of Sophia's Instagram posts, and slid it across the table. Don't you? Because this doesn't look like someone who's struggling. Sophia glanced at the screen, her face pale. I was going to pay it back, she stammered. When? Clara demanded. After we were homeless? You've been lying to us this whole time, Sophia, using your kids as an excuse to live off us while we fall apart. Linda tried to interject, but Clara held up a hand. No, Linda, you don't get to lecture me about family loyalty when your daughter has been stealing from me. The table was silent. Clara stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, she said, her voice firm. I won't let you drag me down with you. Without waiting for a response, she walked out, leaving them to sit in the mess they had created. Back at the apartment, Clara began packing her things. She didn't know what her next step would be, but one thing was certain, she couldn't stay. As she folded clothes into a suitcase, Mark appeared in the doorway, his voice heavy with emotion. "Clara, please don't do this, we can fix it." She looked at him, the man she had once loved so deeply, now a stranger. "You made your choice, Mark," she said quietly, "and it wasn't me." Mark's shoulders slumped as Clara zipped up her suitcase. The weight of his betrayal hung heavy between them, and Clara knew it was a burden she could no longer carry. Tina placed a steady hand on Clara's shoulder. "You're not walking away, Clara, you're rebuilding. Trust me, this time, you're going to build something so much stronger." The next day, Clara's phone buzzed with a message from Mark. It was brief and to the point. "Can we talk? Just us." Clara stared at the text for a long moment, her emotions swirling in a storm of anger, sadness, and curiosity. Part of her wanted to ignore it entirely. Another part, the part that remembered the man she'd fallen in love with, wanted answers. After a deep breath, she typed back, "Fine, tomorrow, at the park." The following afternoon, Clara arrived early at the park. She sat on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, her hands stuffed in her coat pockets as the chilly Portland air nipped at her cheeks. She watched children laughing and playing on the nearby playground, their joy a bittersweet reminder of simpler times. Mark arrived a few minutes later, looking tired and disheveled. His once pristine appearance had given way to wrinkled clothes and a shadow of stubble. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly, sitting beside her. Clara didn't respond right away. She kept her gaze on the playground, watching a father push his daughter on a swing. Finally, she turned to Mark, her expression hard. "What do you want?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "I messed up, Clara, I know I did. I should have told you about the money, the bills, everything. I thought I could fix it on my own." "By lying to me?" Clara shot back, her voice sharp. "By taking our savings without even asking?" Mark flinched as if her words physically struck him. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I was just trying to help. Sophia, she's been through so much, losing her husband, raising 2 kids alone." "And what about me, Mark?" Clara interrupted, her voice rising. "What about us? Do you think this hasn't been hard for me too? I was your partner, you were supposed to trust me. Instead, you chose to betray me." "I didn't see it that way," Mark said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "For who?" Clara asked, her eyes narrowing. "Because it sure wasn't for us." Mark looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he admitted. "I let my guilt over Sophia's situation cloud my judgment. I put her needs above yours, above ours. And I'm sorry." Clara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Mark. Sorry doesn't pay the rent or undo the damage you've done." "I know," Mark said, his voice earnest, "but I want to make it right. I've started therapy. I've been talking to my boss about taking on extra work to pay back what I took. I'm trying, Clara." Clara stared at him, searching his face for a glimpse of the man she had once trusted implicitly. She could see the regret in his eyes, but regret wasn't enough. Trust, once broken, wasn't so easily repaired. "I appreciate that you're trying," she said finally, "but I don't know if I can forgive you for this." Mark nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting her response. "I understand, but I'm not giving up on us, Clara, not yet." Clara didn't reply. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. But another part, the part that had been betrayed, wasn't ready to let go of her anger. Later that evening, Clara returned to the apartment for the first time in days. Mark wasn't home, but Sophia was. She sat on the couch, her children playing quietly on the floor. When Clara walked in, Sophia looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Clara," Sophia said hesitantly, standing as if to greet her, "can we talk?" Clara crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "What is there to talk about, Sophia? You've already said enough with your actions." Sophia wrung her hands nervously. "I know I've messed up. I know I've taken advantage of you and Mark. And I'm sorry." "Are you?" Clara asked coldly, "because it didn't seem like you were sorry when you were posting pictures of your shopping trips and new clothes while we were struggling to keep a roof over our heads." Sophia winced, her shoulders slumping. "I was trying to keep up appearances. After Tom died, I didn't know how to handle everything, the bills, the kids, the loneliness. It all felt like too much. So I made bad choices." bad choices that hurt other people, Clara said, her tone unyielding. Do you even realize the position you've put us in? I do now, Sophia said, her voice cracking. I've been selfish, and I see that now. I want to make things right, Clara. Clara studied her sister-in-law for a long moment. There was sincerity in Sophia's voice, but Clara wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Then start by fixing your own life, Clara said firmly. Stop expecting others to carry you while you drag them down, because I'm done. Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I will, I promise. Clara didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked to her room, shutting the door behind her. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace, not from reconciliation, but from drawing her boundaries and reclaiming her space. Sophia stood with tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with sincerity. I will, Clara, I promise I'll make things right. Clara stared at her, unsure whether to believe the words. Sophia had always been good at playing the victim, but this time there was something different in her tone, something genuine. We'll see, Clara said finally, her voice steady. Actions speak louder than words. Sophia, if you really want to make things right, show me. Sophia nodded, wiping her tears. I will, I promise. That night, Clara sat alone in the apartment, her mind racing. The confrontation with Sophia had left her drained but also strangely hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, things could change, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Promises were easy to make, but much harder to keep. As she stared out the window at the city lights, Clara realized one thing with clarity: she needed to prioritize herself. She couldn't keep sacrificing her happiness and stability for others. It was time to take control of her own life. With a renewed sense of determination, she picked up her phone and started making a plan. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: no one else would dictate her path again. A week later, Clara sat in the corner booth of a small coffee shop in downtown Portland, a familiar spot from her marriage to Mark. This time, however, the visit felt different. She had requested to meet him here, not to rekindle anything, but to find closure for the unresolved. Mark arrived a few minutes late, his shoulders slightly hunched, his expression weary. He spotted Clara and gave her a hesitant wave before approaching the table. Hey, he said, sitting down across from her. Clara nodded, folding her hands on the table. Hey. The silence between them was heavy. Clara studied him for a moment. He looked thinner, older, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. It wasn't anger she felt toward him anymore, just a quiet sadness. I wanted to talk about what happens next, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. It's time to make decisions. Mark nodded, his eyes dropping to the coffee cup in front of him. I get it. I've been thinking about it too. I've been staying at a motel for now, but I found a roommate situation that's more permanent. Clara raised her eyebrows. A roommate? Yeah, Mark said softly. I need to figure out who I am without everything else, without Mom's influence, without Sophia leaning on me. I've started therapy too. That's a good step, Clara said, surprised by his candor. Mark met her gaze for the first time. I know I can't undo what I've done, Clara, but I want you to know I'm sorry, for breaking your trust, for not putting you first, for all of it. Clara nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Mark, but this isn't just about apologies, it's about actions. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if I'm tied to this mess. Mark looked away, his jaw tightening. Does that mean you're filing for divorce? Clara exhaled. She had thought long and hard about this. Yes, she said finally. It's what's best for both of us. We need to start over separately. Mark nodded, his expression pained but accepting. I understand. I don't want to hold you back anymore. For the first time in months, Clara felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. The decision, though painful, felt right. A week later, Clara was back at the apartment, boxing up her belongings. Mark had already moved out, leaving her the space to pack in peace. Sophia and her kids had left too, opting to stay with Linda temporarily. The quiet was both eerie and comforting. As she packed, Clara found an envelope tucked into one of the kitchen drawers. It was addressed to her, the handwriting unmistakably Sophia's. She opened it cautiously, expecting yet another apology. Instead, she found a check and a short note. Clara, I know this doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I've been working and saving, and I'm going to pay back every cent I owe you. Thank you for being the one who forced me to wake up. You didn't have to, but you did. I'll never forget it. Sophia. Clara stared at the check. Her emotions a mix of surprise and disbelief. It wasn't a large amount, but it was a step, a tangible effort to repair the damage. Months passed. Clara moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, closer to her school. The space was modest, but cozy, filled with sunlight and the hum of new beginnings. She began focusing on herself for the first time in years, rediscovering hobbies she had once loved, like painting and hiking. Tina remained her constant support, their friendship growing even stronger. One evening, as Clara sat on her balcony, sketching the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Tina. "You're going to want to see this. Check Sophia's Instagram." Clara hesitated before opening the app. Sophia had been quiet on social media for months, but her latest post showed her kids at a park, smiling wide as they played. The caption read, "Starting fresh, new job, new outlook, grateful for second chances." Clara stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe, just maybe, Sophia was turning things around. A year after everything had fallen apart, Clara found herself back at the same coffee shop, but this time for a different reason. She was meeting Tina to celebrate a milestone, her promotion to department head at her school. As Clara sipped her coffee, she thought about how far she had come. The pain of betrayal had lessened, replaced by a quiet strength. She no longer felt defined by the mistakes of others. Instead, she had rebuilt her life on her terms. "Here's to starting over," Tina said, raising her mug in a toast. Clara clinked her mug against Tina's, a genuine smile on her face. "Here's to growth." Outside the coffee shop, the city buzzed with life. Clara watched as people hurried past, each carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, no longer burdened by the weight of betrayal. She was free to embrace the future, a future she had built with her own strength and determination.